school starts tomorrow. All the parents, right? Everybody just, yes, gone. So we're excited to have all the young ones again in our school. We're looking forward to this year. I know I am looking forward to this year, looking forward to spending time with them and getting to know them a little bit more. What a pleasure and honor it is to have them in our classes. I get to teach 3rd and 4th this year. So y'all pray for me. I've never taught so young. So looking forward to it definitely, but I think it's going to be a great time. It'll definitely be a learning time for me. And I think it'll be an awesome, awesome time there. Ladies Missions Group will be September 14th, at 6:30 p.m. in the auditorium. And then the information for the upcoming ladies activity is there as well. You'll want to read through that and make plans to be here for that as well. Let's take our Bibles. We're going to go to Nehemiah chapter 13. If you can believe it, this is the last chapter. We're almost done. We're almost through it. And then we're going to get to the book of Esther. Man, what a tremendous, tremendous book that is. I already think I found somebody's favorite book. I'm not going to say who, but one of us is excited to get to the book of Esther. We do have a visitor with us today. I got a couple. We have Miss Lavina and Jimmy here. They're visiting us from Arbuckle. They were here last week, but here in our Sunday school, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us. We also do have as well my older brother Joel in the back. Joel, if you just raise your hand, wave at everybody there. That's my older brother. As you can tell, I got the good looks, right? So, but he's here, and we're thankful for him being here as well and joining us this morning. So, we are in Nehemiah chapter 13. Nehemiah chapter 13. If you remember, Nehemiah had taken his leave of absence, had gone back home to the palace in Shushan, right? He had taken and said, okay, I'm going to be there for this amount of time. The king said, you need to come back. He heads back, and we read that he asked the king again, can I go back one more time? He says, yes. He comes back, and what he found astonished them. If you remember, he gets back to Jerusalem and finds that they had intermingled again with the people of the surrounding lands. Now remember, let's think about this, okay? The people that surrounded Jerusalem, were they friendly? No, they were not. Okay, these were not good people. They did not have Israel's best intentions at heart. Okay, and we do realize that they were trying to infiltrate and get in and change everything that Israel stood for. And that's what we're going to pick it up here in verse number 1. Nehemiah chapter 13 and verse 1 says, on that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit, our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now it came to pass, when they had heard the law, that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. So Nehemiah gets back. He finds out what is going on, okay? And he brings out the Bible. He brings out the Pentateuch, the law, and he says, listen to this. And he slaps it down on the table there and says, read this right here. And they read it, and it says, of course, the Ammonite and the Moabite can never, never, never mix with the Israelites because of how they treated Israel. And God had put a very definite line of separation there, and they had crossed that line completely. I mean, they had gone in God's face and said, we don't care what you said. Remember, they did the reading of the law. Do you guys remember when they were outside and they had that great revival? Then they built the tents outside and continued to have the public reading. So they had heard this recently. Okay, this was not new news to them. Okay, I don't know how long Nehemiah was gone. People believed it was about a year to 2 years. So in a year to 2 years, they changed back. I mean, it was just immediate. Leadership left. They went back to doing what they were doing. What's that phrase, right? When the cat's away, the mice will play. And that's kind of what happened here. Nehemiah left, and they kind of looked around and said, hey, we'll be okay. No one's going to know. No one's going to know. No one has to know what's going to happen. I'm not going to say anything. You better not say anything, and we'll be just fine. And that's kind of the prevailing thought that we see here. Really sad, honestly, if you think about it. Verse number 4. And before this, Eliashib, the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, was allied unto who? Now, do we remember our good friend Tobiah? Right? He had married into the nobility, right? His son had married into the nobility of Israel. He was friends with all the nobles, the ones that were backstabbing Nehemiah the entire time he was trying to build the wall and all of that fun stuff. And we find out that they were allied unto him, okay? Through the marriage probably of his son or his daughter was allied unto Tobiah. It does not tell us how, but it does tell us that they were. Now understand this. He's the high priest. He's one of the high priests they had there in that time. Okay, it's said that he had a place of prominence throughout the priesthood. So this is one of the major spiritual leadership of Israel, and he has allied himself to God's enemy. How well do you think God took that? Probably not pretty good, right? So now we're going to see the response. But right here, we're going to go into a section where it's going to tell us what he had done. Listen to verse 5. And he had prepared for him, now him is Tobiah, a great chamber, where aforetime, listen to this, they laid the meat offerings, the frankincense, and the vessels, and the tithes of the corn, the new wine, and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the offerings of the priests. So what did they do? They took the room where all of the offerings that were going to be given to the Levites, okay? They stored them in this room so that they could go and take what they needed, okay? They were stored in this room. They moved all of that out and moved God's enemy into the temple. Think about that. Okay, that'd be opening, I don't know, a get-free drugs clinic here at West Valley Baptist Church in our nursery. Okay, that's kind of what was going on here. And they just said, come on in, we'll move everything that's God's out, and you can put whatever you want in there. I mean, think about it. They probably made it says a great chamber, so it was a big room. So they gave him the choice room. They didn't give him the little one. They gave him the big one, okay? So as you can see, they were trying to curry favor with this man. So what happened throughout the time that Nehemiah was gone? Bible does not tell us, but I think maybe good old Tobiah strolled into Jerusalem after Nehemiah was gone, and he said, listen, he's gone. I've helped you in the past. I am married through marriage. I am part of your family. We are allies, okay? I've left my bad ways, okay? And I want to help you. And I'm sure he brought them a gift, maybe money, maybe food. And he said, look, here's my charity. I'm a good person. You don't have to worry about me. All I want to do is help you. But I don't have anywhere to stay. You see, I come from a far, far away land, right? And I have nowhere to stay. Could you give me a room? And of course, Israel, upon seeing the money that this man had, remember he was one of the governors, okay, he had money, okay, they probably said, this is a guy we don't want to lose. This is a good ally. This is a good friend. Look at all the money he's given us. Look at all the food he's given us. Look at all the friendship, right? If we have Tobiah on our side, maybe the people won't attack us anymore, right? So let's give him the big room. Can you hear one of the priests? But that's where we keep all the offerings. I don't worry about that. Just move him to another room. And that's what's happening here. Pretty incredible, the disrespect to God's house that these people had. Verse 6 through 8. But in all this time was not I at Jerusalem. See, Nehemiah was not there. For in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes king of Babylon came I unto the king, and after certain days obtained I leave of the king. So he came back, probably gave the king a report of what had happened. Probably told him we built the wall, we built the gates, right? The city is about half built, but we're working on building it back again. And understand this city was under, at this point, Persian rule, okay? The Medo-Persians, which means if a city is built and begins to produce, what does that mean? More money for them, right? So, perfect. No worries. That's great, right? That sounds good to me, okay? So, probably happy king, right? Good job, Nehemiah, but I need you here with me. You're going to stay here with me for a little bit. Notice it says at the end of that verse, after certain days, I obtained I leave of the king. So he had to stay. He had to fulfill his obligations as the king's cupbearer, okay? Probably had to stay for a little bit. Then he said, King, I'd like to go back again. And we understand the king said, that's fine, okay? Verse 7, and I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. Now notice, Nehemiah doesn't play any games. Okay, he doesn't say, oh, you just made a mistake. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We understand. No, what does he say? You did wrong. He literally calls it evil right off the bat. That's why I like Nehemiah. Nehemiah didn't cut around any corners. He didn't beat around the bush. He just said it like it was. And here, can you just see him? Nehemiah walks in, and I don't think he announced his coming back. And he walks in, and there's Eliashib making Tobiah's bed. Right? What is it called when they hit the rugs to get the dust out of it, right? That's what he's doing, right? And Nehemiah walks in and says, what's this? And Eliashib says, oh, this is Tobiah's room. think Nehemiah felt? After, what's that? Probably. I mean, think about it, okay? Now let's go back in the timeline here, okay? Since the beginning of Nehemiah, once he gets to the promised land, back to Jerusalem, what do the nobles begin to do? They begin to backstab him, right? If you remember in chapter 3, it says the nobles of the Tekoites did not want to work. They did not want to put their hands to the work, okay? So they said, we're too good for this. We're not going to do that, okay? Then we read a little bit later, right, that the nobles began to tax the people, right? The people were so busy working on the walls, they were not able to cultivate their own food, okay? So they began to run out of money, began to run out of food. So they began to sell off their homes to these nobles who had money, right? And after they sold off their homes, they began to sell off their children, right, to try to bring food home, right? Nehemiah is not happy about this, of course. He goes and he rebukes them, makes them give everything back. But understand, it definitely took some time to parse everything back out to who deserved it, okay? So now that we get past that, do you remember? Tobiah begins to write letters. And he begins to say, I know what you're planning. And he begins to name it and say, it's this and it's this. And I'm pretty sure Nehemiah was like, how did these people know? Then he finds out Tobiah, through a marriage, knows all the nobility of Israel, of Jerusalem, and they had been telling him everything that Nehemiah had said in secret. And then we get back, and here we are again. The spiritual leadership and probably the nobility had once again forsaken God. I don't know about you, but I don't think I could be Nehemiah. I think my patience would have ran thin at this point, and I probably would have gotten quite angry. And I don't know what I would have done, but I don't think I would have stayed to help. I think I would have said, you know what? You guys don't want help. Very, very obviously, you don't care about what God says. I'm out of here. Right? I don't need to be here. Remember, Nehemiah had a very, very profitable job back in Persia, right? In Shushan, in the palace. He was kind of like the king's right-hand man, right? I'm sure the king asked him for advice every now and again. They had a very close relationship. So he didn't have to be there, okay? He had a very good living back at home. And yet these people abused of what he had. Look at verse 8. It's what Brother Isaac said. And it grieved me sore. Therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. Can't you just see it? The door swings open, just slams open, right? He just kicks, bang! And he just starts throwing everything out. Everything just flying out the door, right? And can you tell he's mad? Would you be mad? Yeah, I mean, I would be furious if they did this. All the work we did to establish Jerusalem again, and here you are destroying that very foundation. See, this is what I don't understand, okay? And this is what really, really gets me. Tobiah was not a good person. Do you remember when they said, we're going to kill you? And they said, we're going to mount an offensive against Jerusalem. You know who was part of that? Tobiah was part of that. Now, let's take back here and think logically, okay? If I told you, I'm going to kill you, and I mounted an offensive against you, I mean, I came to your house with a gun to kill you. But at the last second, I turned back because I found out you knew I was coming. And then a couple months later, I come by and I say, can I stay in your home? What would you say? Would you say, yeah, come on in. Yeah, oh, it's good to see you. Oh, that was really funny what you did back then. I mean, oh, what a great joke. Is that what you would say? What would you say? Man, if you don't get out of here, right? I'm going to call the cops right now if you don't get out of here. But that's not what they did. Tobiah threatens to kill them, comes back, and they say, come on in. We'll make you a room in the temple where God resides. Logic that one out for me. And yet that's what happened. It's incredible what happened. Remember, our Lord commended the church at Ephesus for always making sure who was within the church. In Revelation 2:2 he says, I know thy works and thy labor and thy patience, and thou canst not bear them which are evil. And thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars. See, the church at Ephesus made sure that the people that were there were supposed to be there. And we see here that the people of Israel did not do that. Can you imagine how sacrilegious it was to allow such a person to live in the temple? understand this, they had no business being there. They had no business stepping foot inside the temple. And yet, here they are living in it. It's pretty incredible to see how far they fell in such short a time. You read in the book of Judges, chapter 2, that it took one generation for the children of Israel to leave God completely. And we see here, it took only a couple of years for them to say, we don't need God anymore. We don't really care about what he says. Let's bring Tobiah in. It's pretty sad. Verse 9. Then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers. You know what that means? They threw all of Tobiah's stuff out, and then they began to scrub it. Began to scrub all of Tobiah out of there, right? They wanted nothing to do with Tobiah. They said, you're going to clean every spot of this room. Okay, we're going to make sure that this room is purified because this is the temple, and we don't want anything to do with Tobiah in here. Let's continue. And thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God with the meat offering and the frankincense. So once again, Nehemiah said, you better bring everything back. I don't know where you guys took it, but you better put it back in this room. And they did. They went and got everything and put it back into that room. And can't you just see them, right? It's like my dog when she gets in trouble, that little tail goes in between her legs, right? And she does that little walk, kind of looking at you to see what you see your reaction, right? And can you just see them doing that? They're carrying the vessels and kind of just side-eyeing Nehemiah. Right? Can't you just see it? And Nehemiah is just kind of there as the stern father, kind of just watching them move everything, right? But knowing Nehemiah, he probably wasn't doing that. He was probably moving stuff too, right? We see he's a very industrious man. But I don't know about you, I wouldn't want to catch his gaze if I was one of the ones that was guilty in what was going on. Verse 10, and I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. So listen to this, okay? This is what's going on here. They've completely changed this room. All of the meat offerings, everything for the Levites to survive has been put somewhere else. And because they put it somewhere else, now they're not giving them their portion. What does that mean? They're not giving them food. They're not giving them raiment, clothes. They're not giving anything which they deserve. They're not giving it to them. So not only are they accepting the enemy within their ranks, within the temple, now they're beginning to not take care of their own. What are they saying? I would rather take care of Tobiah than of the Levites. That's difficult to understand. It'd be like you saying, I would rather take care of some stranger that I found off the street than one of my own children. That's pretty hard to believe, right? I mean, you read that and you say, no, I would never do that. Well, they did. Let's continue. Verse 10, listen to this. For the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field. So they left the temple. They weren't even there anymore. They weren't coming to do their duties anymore. So if the people who work in the temple are not doing their duties, what do you think started to happen with the temple? Started to fall apart. Started to get dirty, dusty, right? All of the things that were supposed to be done probably were not being done. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. Let's continue. Verse 11. Then contended I with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Now, you can read this one of two ways. Okay? Of course, contended means he confronted them. Who here likes confrontation? Brother Jason's right there. He's like, yeah, I love confrontation, right? Majority of us did not raise our hands, okay? I am not a very confrontational person. I dread these words. I need to talk to you. Don't just say that. Just say, hey, come here and talk to me, okay? That whole thing of I need to talk to you kind of makes you a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous, right? You haven't done anything wrong, and you're already thinking, what did I do? Right? And so here, Nehemiah puts everything in order, and then he goes and finds the nobility. He says, come here. You come here. We're going to have a talk right now. So they go in there, and he says, why is the house of God forsaken? Why are you guys letting this happen? Then it says, and I gathered them together. He gathered all the nobility, okay, probably all the Levites, he probably gathered them back. And it says, and he set them in their place. Now, the set them in their place can go one of two ways, okay? Scholars are kind of split on this. I'll tell you which one I like and which one's probably the truth, okay? The truth is this. He probably put them back in their positions of what they were supposed to work in. Okay, he probably took the Levites and got them back into the temple and said, listen, I've reinstated your meat offering. I've reinstated your food and your pay. It's going to be right here for you. He probably put one of his men in charge of it and said, this person's going to take care of it for you. You don't have to continue to work the way you were doing before. Okay? And that's probably what he did. And the nobility, he probably put them back into their position of leadership and said, listen, and probably chewed them out and gave them what for. Right? That's probably what happened. Here's what I like. This is the one I wish probably would be the meaning. I want him to have sit them down and chewed them out. Okay? I wanted him to have lined them up in the chairs and just taken a turn. Just each one, just down the row. Okay? Because, how many times does this have to happen before they understand? No, I don't think Nehemiah was going to do that. Do I think he was capable? Yeah. We've seen the type of person he is. But I don't think that's what he did. I wish he would have done that, right? Maybe he did. I can pray and hope, right? That's what he did. But we don't know. But what we do know is things start to change. Let's continue on. Verse 14. Verse 14. This phrase, we see it all through Nehemiah. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of God and for the offices thereof. You know what that is? That's Nehemiah praying, saying, God, Lord, help me. Can't you just see him walk out of that meeting with the nobility and just, Lord, please help me. You ever been there before? Right? You walk out of a room or something happens, a problem presents itself, and you kind of just walk out and, Lord, I need you. I've been there. Okay, I'll probably be there a couple of times this year during the school year, right? We've all been there. It's the truth, right? We've all had a situation that makes us feel like, oh man, this is overwhelming. Nehemiah here, this is, if I counted correctly, the 6th time the nobility has failed him. 6 times that the leadership has willingly and blatantly turned their backs on him. And he says, Lord, just help me. I think he was saying, help me not to kill these people, right? Help me not to strangle these people, okay? That's kind of what we see what's going on here. And he says, wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God. He's saying, Lord, remember what I did for you. All these people have turned astray from you, but I haven't. And Lord, just please keep that in remembrance. Say, well, that's kind of braggadocious, right? Not really. What he was doing is he was establishing who he was. And he was saying, Lord, I love you. And I've done right. I've kept myself right. And I have not turned from you. They might have, but I have not. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's what he was doing here. Now, we find something else here as well. Verse 15 and 16, it gets worse. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the what? What sent them into captivity? Do we remember? What were they doing? They were working on the Sabbath. So here they are again, working on the Sabbath. And bringing in sheaves and lading asses, and as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. So remember, before Nehemiah left, he closed the doors, remember? And he stood up on top of the gate, and the merchants came on the Sabbath day, and he told them, if you don't come out, I'm going to come out. And he says, and I'm going to lay hands on you. He told them, I'm going to beat you up, right? I'm going to come out by force, and I'm going to kick you out. And it says that they left, and they didn't come back. Okay? And understand, that probably meant that some of the food, some of the money that flew through Jerusalem was now gone. Okay? It was a deficit that they had to make up. Not difficult concerning God told you, I'm going to bless you if you don't work on the Sabbath day. And we all know God does indeed bless if you do not work on the Sabbath day. Okay? He takes care of all your needs. Okay? And here we see them doing it again. But now it's not merchants from outside. Who is it? It's them. It's them. So now they don't have to worry about them outside. We can do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves. We'll just tread this wine here, and we'll bring in the sheaves, and we'll bring in all of our crops and everything on Sunday. It's a Sabbath day at that point, okay? And we're going to make money. We're going to sell. So here they are. They're setting up their booths, right? And they're getting ready to sell, and here comes Nehemiah. And the Bible says, look what it says here. At the end of verse 15, it says, and I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. You know what that means? They had set up. And Nehemiah waited. And once they were set up, ready to begin to sell, guess who strolled into the plaza? Nehemiah. And it says, and he gave testimony. You know what he did? He started to call them out. Can you imagine? Let's say that I'm a vendor, right? And I'm putting up my little booth there, and I've got all my wares that I'm going to sell. And if you know anything about Hispanic cultures, if they say your full name, you're in trouble. Okay? And can you just imagine you hear, Leonardo! And I turn around, and there's Nehemiah. And he says, listen up. And he starts calling people out. Isaac Yosef, because he'd definitely do it. Right there. Look over here. Right? And he just starts calling people out. And you know what? I bet you what he started to do? Can't you just see it? He has the law in his hands. And he begins to read about the Sabbath day. You know what I would have done? It's right here. Right? I mean, imagine how embarrassing that would be. But they weren't embarrassed to break the Sabbath, were they? So Nehemiah shows up and he calls them out. Because once again, they're doing exactly what had brought them into captivity. Think about it. The things that brought them into captivity, 1, they were given to idols. Okay. 2, they had mixed with the people of the land. And 3, they were working on the Sabbath. And they would not stop working on that 7th year that God had told them, do not work the land. Okay. What are they doing here? They've already given themselves to the people of the land. It does not say that they were doing idol worship, but Tobiah lived in the temple. So they had desecrated the temple the exact same way. Okay? And number 3, now they're working on the Sabbath. Sound familiar? So they've fallen right back into what got them into captivity in the first place. You would think they would learn, right? But we see, of course, the thing that you learn from history is what? You don't learn from history, right? And that's what we see here. Let's continue. Verse 16 and 17. Listen to this. There dwelt men of where? Also therein. So now they have the vendors living in Jerusalem. Okay? So remember, Nehemiah said close the doors. And they said, well, we can fix that. We'll still close the doors. Just move in. We got you homes. And we'll give you a good rate. Just move in. So now we have men of Tyre living within the people as well. Which, listen to this, which brought fish in all manner of ware and sold on the unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. You say, wow, these people of Tyre are terrible. Can you really blame them? They didn't believe in the Sabbath. They were not believers in Jehovah. Their religion probably did not prohibit it. So is it their fault? Probably not. Okay. Were they in the wrong? Yes. Was it their fault? No. They probably didn't know better. You know why? Because the Israelites never stopped them. Okay. The people of Judah never said, hey, we can't sell on the Sabbath. We're not supposed to. They said, yeah, come on in. We got you a home. Yeah, you guys can come live right here. Okay, come and live right here. Make sure you bring your stuff. Right? Can you see it? Let's make it a family fun day. We'll go out to the plaza and we'll go through all the booths and just see everything that's going on. And that's exactly what's happening here. Verse 17. You ready with this? Here we go. Then I contended with the... Don't you just love the nobles? If we count, that's what? Time number 7 that the nobles have done something like this. Nobles of Judah. And said unto them, what evil thing is this that who? Ye do, and profane the Sabbath day. Most scholars would agree that the way they did it was this. In the plaza, you would buy land, okay? And you would rent it out. Now, we understand that most of these people did not have a lot of money, but some people did, and they're called the nobles, okay? The nobles would not work on the Sabbath, okay? They would just rent you the spot. See, you can work, but I'm not going to. I'm not transgressing the law. I'm not working. He is. But just give me the money. I don't know about you, but I think I would have kicked these nobles out. If I had the ability to, I think I would have gone back to the king and said, listen, these nobles, they're no good. We need to get rid of them. And I would have put people in leadership that would have respected the rules that were put in place. Nehemiah was a better man than me. Let's continue. Verse 18. Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So here's Nehemiah, and he's saying, Don't you learn? Your parents did this. My parents did this. Our grandparents did this. And they brought us into slavery, into captivity. And here you are doing the same thing again. Verse 19. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of who? So he said, I can't trust you guys. He said, well, some of my men that came with me, you guys stay here. Some of my servants said, I at the gates, that there should be no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. So now we find out that they were even letting people from outside in as well. See, it probably started out with, come live inside, right? And when they lived inside, the men of Tyre, the people that were inside Jerusalem, probably began to say, hey, I've got some friends that have got some amazing stuff to sell. You're going to love it, I promise you. But they can only come on Sunday. What a convenient thing, huh? They can only come on the Sabbath. They can only come on the day that you were not supposed to sell. And I know you guys don't work on that day, and I know it's a day of rest, but you're not going to work. We are. And all you can come by. It's not work. You can come by and walk, okay? And you can just look. And I promise you, we'll follow what you say. And can you just see the nobles thinking about it? And, you know, they're kind of looking at their pockets, right? And, well, I can line my pockets a little more with a little more money, right? And it's really not that bad. We're not the ones doing it. They are. Can you imagine how everyone felt when those stores opened the first day and all those merchants came on in with all that glittery, shiny stuff, right? And they said, wow, look, we have our gold, right? We have the things that we want. Well, all that glitters is what? Not gold. Without realizing it, I think, and they were so enamored with what they had seen, they didn't realize that they were profaning the very thing that they had promised to do. If you remember, after the revival they had in chapters 9 through 11, they made a covenant with God. And they said, we're not going to go back to that anymore. But look how quickly they broke it. Really, really difficult to read and see. Can you imagine the surprise of the merchants when they showed up that first Sabbath and the doors were closed? And they probably came up and, hey! We've got this and this and this. You're going to love it. And then one of Nehemiah's men pokes his head out and says, you're not coming in. Says who? Says Nehemiah. Oh, he's back. Can't you just see it? Like, oh, come on. Right? And it says they lodged outside, and they probably thought maybe he's just here on vacation. Right? He'll leave soon. And that second week comes by and the doors still aren't open and they realize Nehemiah's still here. It's one of those things that you read and it's difficult to understand. Let's continue, verse 21. Then I testified against them and said unto them, why lodge ye about the wall? Saying, why are you guys putting up your tents? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. If you don't leave, I'm going to come out there and we're going to do this by violence, okay? You're going to need to leave. Nehemiah wasn't playing games. Verse 23. In those days also saw I Jews that were married, wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, listen to this, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. You see what's happening here? They're taking over. They're starting to destroy the culture of the Jews. And they were just fine with it. They're just fine. It didn't even bother them. It didn't bug them what these people were doing. Let's continue. Verse 25. And I contended with them, listen to this, and cursed them, and smote certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. So here's Nehemiah. Can't you just see him walking through, and he's just smacking people, right? Other people, he's pulling their hair because they're not listening. I mean, he's just going to town. I think he's having a good time. He's getting people's attention, okay? It says he's plucking out their hair. Do you know how hard you have to pull somebody's hair out? Ask Zach. He's really good at it. Okay, think about that. Okay, that's quite a bit of anger. Okay, But these people are allowing the people of the land to destroy what God had built. They were allowing the pagan people to come in and change who they were. You know what's a good way to put it? They were accredited. You know what accreditation is? You allow the government to come in and tell you what you can and cannot teach. You know what they did? They got accredited with the people of the land. Come on in, guys. Tell us what we should know. Tell us what language to speak. Notice, their kids could not speak their language. Why? They were being indoctrinated. Know why? To get rid of Israel. Get rid of this plague that we have here named Israel. It's incredible. Nehemiah contends with them. He yells at them. He pronounces curses at them. I think this is the biggest display of anger that we've seen from Nehemiah. But can't you just see the years of pent-up, built-up frustration kind of boil over a little bit? You know, I don't think Nehemiah was in the wrong here. I really don't. So many times the nobles had failed him. And think about this now, okay? So remember, listen to this, okay? They were worse here than they were in the beginning of Nehemiah. Because in the beginning of Nehemiah, they spoke their language. They did. They had their culture. Do you remember how excited they were in Ezra when they built the temple? And how excited they were when they finally had the dedication of the walls? Remember how just jubilant they were to be Jewish? Right? To have their own piece of Jerusalem to themselves. And now we see them giving that all up. It's pretty difficult to understand. Jump with me to verse 29. Last 3 verses. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the what? So even the priests. Remember good old Eliashib? Making that room for Tobiah? You think that was the only thing that he transgressed on? If he had gotten to the point where he would allow God's enemies to enter into the church and live there, what else do you think he wasn't doing? It's pretty bad. They had defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus, cleanse thy them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, every one in his business, and for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. I love that the book of Nehemiah ends with that phrase, because that was Nehemiah's life. I don't know about you, but you look back at Nehemiah's life, is that one you would want to live? Do you aspire to be Nehemiah? Putting up with a bunch of knuckleheads that backstab you all the time, receiving death threats for doing what God has asked you to do. Then you head back home and you're in peril of dying every day. Why? Because you're the king's cupbearer. You taste his drink to see if it has poison in it. So if it has poison in it, guess what's going to happen? You're going to die. Is that something we would aspire to be? Probably not, right? Not the most glamorous life. But it was a life that God said, hey, I'm going to put it in the Bible. And give him his own book because of what he did. Notice here at the end, verse 29, it says, you guys have defiled everything that the priesthood is. What God had set up as the sanctity of the office of the priesthood, you've defiled it. You've corroded and eroded it away. It's like it doesn't even matter to you, this office. And then verse 30, thus cleanse thy them from all strangers. You know what he did? He went through, can't you just see him? He's going to every house and saying, are you Israelite? Are you an Israelite? No, I'm from Tyre. Get out. Are you from, and he started to go through. Remember that census he took? Where he numbered all the people, got all their names? And that came in handy, didn't it? He went through, kicked everybody that wasn't supposed to be out. Then he went through and he began to appoint everybody in the correct offices. You know what that means? That means that people that weren't supposed to be in those offices had stepped in. Who do you think those people were? It's the people of the land, the strangers, the people that were never supposed to fill those offices within Israel. They had been so far gone that even their leadership had changed. He comes in and says, we're not doing this anymore. And he ends the book of Nehemiah with, remember me, O my God, for good. If you look at Nehemiah's life, I think that's pretty emblematic of how he lived. He lived a life that was pretty exemplary. I mean, all the times, all the tribulations he went through, all the times that he could have been killed, and yet he pressed on. With that phrase in mind, remember me, oh my God, for good. I think having your own book in the Bible is pretty good. It's pretty good remembrance, right? All these years later, and we're still talking about Nehemiah because of the way he lived his life. Pretty exemplary and incredible man of God, I would say. We're all done with the book of Nehemiah. Next week, we'll go right into the book of Esther. I've already been studying it, and I almost jumped ahead and taught a lesson I learned from it, but I held myself back in English. Because in Spanish, I already taught it. So you guys get the second dose of it, right, in English. But I thank you so much for being part of our Sunday school class. I'll pray, and we'll be dismissed. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you, Lord, for the merciful and wonderful God that you are. I thank you, Lord, that you allow us to come to church and learn of you, Father. What a tremendous blessing it is to be able to get to know you better, Father, through your word. Lord, I would ask for this coming service that you would please bless it, Father. Help it, Lord, to be a blessing to each and every individual that listens to it, Lord, whether here in person or online. Father, that we would grow as a result of it and that we would leave this church a changed people. Please, Father, help us. All these things we ask in your heavenly name. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. You are dismissed.